I make the most of my lunch break by catching up on our company's shared newsfeed and workplace. Oh, Sarah, that's true. I promised her that we would go running after work today. Clearly, she did not forget. Let's do this properly. I'll schedule an event on Workplace. Maybe Jeremy will want to join us later today. Speaking of Jeremy, I enjoy working with him, but his speciality seems to be hosting meetings in hallways. There are loads of available meeting rooms, and it will be a shame not to make the most of them. Here we go. Now we'll be much more efficient. No need for GPS. I've booked the closest meeting room. Workplace. You've worked hard today. You deserve to relax now. Let's go running.
Hi, this is Eric Stromquist, and you're watching DCTV, brought to you by the folks at Distech Control. DCTV is the place where we discuss, debate, and educate the topics and trends that the smart building controls professional needs to know to be in the know in today's market. And today's topic, K-12. Are you making the grade? Got a great team lined up to discuss this, including an integrator, somebody that runs a whole school system, and a couple of fine folks from Distech Control. So let's introduce our panel right off the bat. Tony, how about introducing yourself and tell our audience what you do?
Thanks, Eric. My name's Tony Eisenhower. I'm the Regional Director of Sales for the eastern half of the United States for Distech Controls. Been in this industry for over 30 years and looking forward to speaking with the panel today.
Well, very, very cool. We got our first question from Rob Allen with Stromquist Company in Atlanta. He wants to know who your favorite distributor on the East Coast is.
You know, my favorite distributor in Atlanta has to be Rob Allen at Stromquist Controls.
Very, very good, Tony. That was the right answer. You're going to do really well today. Paul, how about introducing yourself?
Sure. My name is Paul Valente. My title is the Facility Automation Architect, and I work for Chicago Public Schools. So I'm in charge of all of our BAS, BMS, and IoT infrastructure for the entire district. So
very cool. We're so glad to have you. And gosh, if we got somebody that's uniquely qualified to talk about making the grade, Paul, you're right there with us. So appreciate it. But we got our next guest, Jim. You kind of make things happen at a lot of these school systems. How about introduce yourself, tell the folks where you're from and what you do.
Sure, Eric, thank you. My name is Jim Shadley. I'm with JMS Integrated Building Solutions. I'm the owner and president. We are systems integrator focused on Distech controls, and a large part of our customer base has been K-12 and had that experience throughout my whole career of getting to serve K-12 customers.
Well, very, very cool. And last but not least, Dustin, who the heck are you and why are you on this panel?
Sure, yeah. I'm Dustin Collicott. I'm a regional sales manager with Distech here in the Midwest. I've been in the industry for 15 years, and in my prior life, I worked for a couple other controls companies calling exclusively on education facilities, K-12, school districts, higher ed. So I've been in hundreds of schools.
Well, very, very cool, guys. And listen, I think if we're going to draw a line in the sand for a discussion point, we got to start with the COVID, right? So let's talk what you guys are seeing, what you guys saw pre-COVID, and what you guys are seeing now. And Paul, why don't we start with you on that question?
Sure. Yeah. Well, pre-COVID, there was a lot of movement in our organization to modernize and consolidate our building automation systems. I mean, obviously, with COVID coming out, I mean that greatly accelerated that pace. So we had a lot more projects that were coming. I think the biggest change from pre to current state is just now the focus on the quality of the ventilation in the spaces, as well as the controls and schedulability of everything. So it's been a dramatic change in the course of a little over a year, you know.
Well, no, absolutely, for sure. And I know we probably have a lot of moms and dads with kids who've been at home, you know, doing the school from home that are just really thrilled about this episode. Are most of your kids back to school now, or are they still doing remote?
About a third or so that are back. The goal set by the mayor and our leadership is full occupancy for next school year, so back in September.
So Jim, same question for you. I mean, what have you seen as an integrator pre-COVID versus post-COVID?
Well, Eric, pre-COVID, we had a lot of emphasis in strategies that we're utilizing outside air to provide fresh air to the building. However, the strategies were focused on reducing the amount of outside air so we could reduce energy. Post-COVID, we've seen those strategies turn a little bit more to be focused more on providing fresh air and quality indoor air quality as opposed to the energy. Same strategies, just being used differently.
Right. So it does seem like there's a little bit of a trade-off there. You know, we're maximizing energy savings now versus making sure that the building's safe. Tony, what are you guys hearing from a Distech perspective? Are your clients asking you for different control strategies, or what are you hearing pre-COVID, post-COVID?
It's been a mixture, Eric. We started out, everybody was really slow and the schools weren't even letting our integrators in the schools. And then it opened up and they started letting people in, and they started looking at UV and ionization and different methods of trying to clean the air and clean the room. So we've worked on really trying to make the building healthier, touchless. We've tried to look at the touchless environment and how can we assist in that method. So it's been a merger of a lot of different technologies we've been trying to utilize.
Right, and for our listeners who might not know, I mean, we covered the UV lighting in different ways to make the system touchless on our last episode of DCTV. So if you haven't seen that, I would encourage you to go back and look at it. Dustin, from your perspective, I mean, you've dealt with multiple vendors, and you know, like you said in your introduction, what are you sort of seeing?
Yeah, I mean, like these guys said, there was a real change with ASHRAE when COVID came out. They put out some core recommendations and guidelines that these guys have all already touched on, including air cleaning, right? You can do that through UV or ionization. You can also do it through filters, but it takes more energy to push air through a thicker filter. And like Jim said, they're bringing more outside air into the building. So it's really interesting. We're starting to care more about the health of a school than we do about the energy use. And I think that's going to have big impacts for the future.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Paul, how are you finding it? I mean, because obviously you're probably balancing a lot of budgets and they probably put pressure on you. They want everything from you, right?
Yep.
So what are sort of the conversations you're hearing regarding the energy versus the safety? I mean, are they trying to get you to balance it, or what are they asking you to do?
Well, we're always trying to reduce, our consumption. We have distinct consumption reduction goals by our Director of Energy Sustainability to be much more sustainable. But obviously, now with increased occupancy times, in order for us to be able to do the air flushing that we want in the buildings, there's going to be that trade-off where you have to consume in order to be able to do it. I think for us, it's also the realization that like a lot of educational institutions, we can't put off a lot of maintenance. So we've traditionally operated to fail in our organization, and now we're trying to be a bit more proactive. And then by doing that, by doing some of these proactive repairs and maintenance and things like that, we're actually saving energy because then the systems aren't running as wild as they used to be. So there is still going to be consumption savings, even in a COVID environment. It's not as great as it was before when you had a fully operational system, and then you can really go into like econ mode and look and tweak your sequences that way. But it'll be interesting to see in like the next year or so, once we have occupancy back in fuller numbers, sort of what our normalized energy consumption is with our new occupancy scheduling that we've deployed for the district, as well as the other mitigation strategies that we've done as well too. It's been eye-opening.
Yeah,
sure.
Well, it's going to be fun too, because like you said, with the strategies and all, and you guys have probably had time to really think about things, right? Because schools haven't been occupied to the extent they were. So I want to get back to strategies in a little bit, but I kind of want to shift to Jim real quick. And Jim, I mean, they're probably calling you up going, hey, we need more ventilation and more energy savings. I mean, as an integrator, how are you balancing those out?
Well, we work with the school districts themselves, and they're taking advantage of the topic, bringing HVAC system repair and changes to the forefront. So we work with them to address their most important needs, whether it be replacing controls in a building that they can't actually use those strategies, to changing the sequences of the systems that they already have in place. And we've seen that become a very hot topic for them. And it's really working together to come up with the best solution to meet their needs, because obviously some mechanical systems, they don't have the money to change them out, so they have to look at ways to optimize those systems. And we work together to come up with strategies to do that.
There's a creative thing that, creatives use, artists and stuff like that, which they'll actually limit. Like a painter, for example, might only use 2 or 3 colors versus a whole palette. And out of that comes great creativity. And it seems like you guys are being challenged to get in touch with your inner artist a little bit here. So I think good things are going to come out of it ultimately at the end of it. But Dustin, I mean, you mentioned ASHRAE and the ASHRAE standards. How are they taken into effect? We need more ventilation and energy. Are there some guidelines there that help sort of get the best of both worlds?
Yeah, unfortunately, the new guidelines, I mean, overall, we're increasing energy a little bit, but they do care about energy. They do recommend shutting things off, especially when a building is unoccupied. And then a lot of integrators are struggling with ways to hit those blended building sequence of operation goals, where we want the building to be healthy, but we also want it to save energy. And ASHRAE has a guideline out for that ASHRAE guideline 36, high performance sequence of operations. And DISTEC is building its new program library around that guideline to help integrators and schools hit those blended goals, because like you said, we have to get creative.
No, that's awesome. And Tony, I mean, speak about that for the integrators out there that are working with K12. What I heard Dustin say is true. You guys are sort of doing a lot of the work in terms of programming. Is that correct?
We're spending a lot of development on building tools to make our integrators more efficient, and it's going to flow into the work that they do into these schools. So, it's a really, really important part of being more efficient on both our end and helping the schools be more efficient as well.
Now, another thing I'm wondering is, I mean, if you guys are using like the UV lights, like, in our last episode, we talked about that, and how that helps, mitigate some of the risk. Could you do that in lieu of having to bring additional ventilation in? Would they allow you to do that, Dustin? Or, I mean, is that another option? So Paul or Jim are hit with, hey, we want the energy saving, but want the building to be safe. Is using UV lights a way you could do that where you're not having to bring as much outside air in?
It's one way, but it's not necessarily the best way. I think a great thing to remember when it comes to cleaning the air in your building is there's a lot of different ways to skin a cat, right? So there's a lot of different ways that we can clean the air in a building. We can filter it. We can clean it with UV lighting. Another technology that has come to light is bipolar ionization, or we can bring more air into the building. So those are kind of the three ways that we clean the air. I don't know if anybody else has.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah. Jim, Paul, you have anything to add to that, or Tony?
Jimmy, go ahead.
No, I just would say that, yeah, we've seen UV and bipolar ionization being utilized as technologies. And then obviously, as Dustin said, is we can, many of the schools have just gone to introducing more outside air.
You know, for us, it's a balancing game. You know, so we back in the beginning of COVID, we had to we're looking at all the possibilities of what we can do. You know, UV, bipolar, standalone, air scrubbing units in the classroom, things like that. And you have to balance sort of the infrastructure for all the power that's needed for implementing the solutions and implementation costs with, you know, what are your ultimate goals. For us, we determined more, the solution was dilution. So bringing in as much outside air as possible, especially in the shoulder season, which we have here in Chicago. And so that we can get sort of free cooling, you know, and then really just sort of maximize that. Our strategy over winter was, you know, trying to balance when it was extremely cold with how much air we were bringing in order to meet the Chicago City Code. So it's a difficult balancing act, I think, for like a school system to sort of take into mind, because you have to be budget minded, you know, when you're doing that. And as much as you want to be have as healthy of a building as possible, it's within reason of what you can financially procure.
Eric, I've talked with large school systems like Paul and small school systems, and even, you know, Paul manages about 64 million square feet of schools, and they still have, you know, budget pricing that they have to look at the cost, not only at the beginning, but the maintenance and the additional cost that continues with that. So they're looking at that, and most people are really focusing on really outside air and bringing more in and trying to make that a better, healthier environment through that.
Well, yeah, let's talk about that a little bit, because Paul, I suspect one of the challenges you have, and Jim, I suspect one of the things you run into a lot is, I'm guessing that they put things out for bid, Paul, and how does typically a school system sort of assess that? Because they're looking to save money. And Jim, you run into this all the time, I'm sure, where my guess is you're not usually the low bidder. Let's talk a bit about, for our listeners out there who maybe are, you know, dealing with K through 12 or want to deal with K through 12. How do you look at that? I mean, in terms of how do you assess where you're going to invest your money?
Sure. So what we do for building automation, building management systems, in order to not have everybody under the sun, you know, come and bid our projects, we restrict it down through our specifications. So we have a set of named vendors that are in our spec, and those are the ones that are allowed to bid jobs. Now, we further classify what we want through the specification with the types of devices, types of controllers, and things like that. And the same thing goes for any of our products that we're going to be introducing. So we purchased a lot of air purifiers for our classrooms. So that had to go out, obviously, to bid. We had to do sort of like an RFP style thing for that. But it was, you know, figuring out what kind of spec and what types of devices, classes of devices, manufacturers were acceptable, and then putting that in and hoping you get the lowest dollar bid at being the quality of the one you want. It's sort of a crapshoot sometimes if your specs aren't you know, really locked down with your requirements and are pretty open. So. Well,
yeah, let's real quick, Jim, and I want to shift over to you, because it seems like the first episode of DCTV, if you didn't see it, was on open systems. Paul, how important is having systems being open, especially since you've got 6 or 7 that I think you mentioned could actually bid? How important are they being open, and how do you define open?
Great question. It's very important that that we're using open protocols and open systems within the organizations. That allows us some flexibility. I don't have a very large integration team, so I don't have on-site integrators. It's basically myself and 2 project managers who organize all of my projects. So I rely heavily on contractors, a lot of the TCs to do the work. So we try our best to make sure that we have consistency across the vendor pool. So we're trying to do apples to apples comparison from like graphical layouts, performance, usability, feature sets, and things like that. We also, because of our size, mandate that in the sense where we have some of the more proprietary systems, that all tools and programming materials turned over to CPS and licensed to us as well. So that gives us the ability to make sure that we have everything that's there, on those proprietary systems, if we needed to do some programming and whatnot. But open protocol is really the way we're going. We've open protocol BACnet, what we're mandating across the board, and we're migrating everything as of this year spec-wise to full BACnet over IP. So that way we're eliminating any proprietary serial communication that could exist out there, getting rid of MSTP, so that way we'll be fully on the IP layer, and then just growing from there.
Very cool. And you said something that was key that came up in the session we did on open systems, which it sounds like you were able to purchase the same tools if you do need to use it, which I think our audience needs to be aware of.
Correct.
Jim, I mean, you do open systems. I mean, what is one of the biggest misconceptions or biggest mistakes or biggest things you wish customers knew when they think they're getting an open system and they're not really getting it, maybe?
Well, that's a great question, Eric, because a lot of people apply open protocol and think that they're getting an open solution, because we all know that a proprietary front end, even if it's based on BACnet, and the engineering tools and the licensing that's required to operate that front end still locks down the system. So we encourage the customer to look at solutions such as a Niagara platform ECNet from DCTV is what we would provide, and make sure that the system not only is based on an open protocol, but as Paul said, that all of the engineering tools, programming, licensing is available for that customer and that end user. After all, the end user is purchasing the system. It's theirs. They should be able to do whatever they want with it. By providing them with an open solution like we do, we sometimes put ourselves at risk, but we allow them to actually have the freedom to choose who they want to use. Their decision now becomes based upon performance, price, and relationship, as opposed to the color of the box that's on the wall. And so we encourage our customers to look for people that can actually provide true open solutions and have at their disposal to be able to do that. And that's where we've been successful with K-12 customers. And as a result, they're able to pick qualified vendors, whether they're DCTV providers or whether they're another brand that can do work on the system, and we can all work on it together.
Hey, and Eric, I'd like to take that just one step further.
Sure.
This was based on open, but really one of the values we really add is our future ready capability. So when situations like COVID come up, we can modify the controllers that we have because they're based on IP and internet standard protocols that are out there today, more than just BACnet. RESTful API is one of those common protocols that we're using, that we can actually go out there and make adjustments to the equipment that they've already invested in without having to actually change out the product that's there.
Now, future ready is a really great term, and I think you guys illustrated it earlier when you mentioned your development team is working on new programs to meet these ASHRAE standards, right, Dustin? So future ready, I like that word a lot, Paul, is that something you'd heard for a while? If you guys banner that term around when you're in your meetings?
Oh, yeah.
Future ready?
Yeah, we want to we design our buildings for capital construction to be 100-year buildings. So we want the same thing. We want to maximize our investment on our control systems and our mechanical systems. So we try to find the best bang for the buck on everything that's out there, the controls included. So, and then from like a future ready standpoint for us, we try to have enterprise scalable solutions. So our servers are in our data center. We're always making sure we're on the latest patch revision. We have a good patch management strategy as an organization. And by going to BACnet over IP, we'll then have a network level visibility through all of our network monitoring tools of all of the controllers that exist out there, not just the building controllers and the servers. So
Right.
we're giving a lot more flexibility for future ready.
Well, Dustin, you've worked for other vendors too, and I think I know who some of them were. And there is sort of a dirty trick sort of technique, right? Where and again, I think it's just important. Hey, we're talking DCTV. That's got to keep our control people in the know, right? So it's pretty easy to say our system's open because we talk BACnet or an open protocol. But again, if you don't get back to what Jim and Paul are talking about, where the owner actually owns the system, the data, and the tools. And but agree or disagree, Dustin, is that something they should be looking for?
I mean, that's a huge issue in school districts because they get sold a lot by contractors and they might not 100% understand what they're buying. So even though they may think that they're getting an open system, they may not be getting the tools they need to keep their system open, right? And I think another thing that we missed in our discussion about open is adoption. Right. So openness is one thing, open protocols, open tool sets, getting to own your tool sets, and then adoptions. Who's using that system in the marketplace? How many people are able to service it after the fact? What's the life cycle of that system? The tool sets have really been protocols. Everybody talks about open protocols nowadays, and the tools are really where the systems are getting locked down. I was just on a call last week where, with Distech, all of our tool sets are open. They're built into our Tritium products and IP controllers. They never expire. They're pretty easy to use. And you can even load them onto a third-party manufacturer system. So like on a Honeywell or Johnson system, we used to be able to put our tool set on their system. Now Honeywell and Johnson are locking down their systems and their JASES. So we can't even put our tool set on their system. So yeah, there's a lot of evolution going on with tool sets, and it's really exciting to see where it's going to head.
No, I think it makes sense. And Paul and Jim and Tony, you can hop in on this too for our facilities managers out there who want to make sure they don't get locked into this situation where they think they're getting open. Give us one or two questions that you would ask a vendor to make sure that they were on the up and up in terms of making sure you had the ultimate flexibility.
Yeah, I guess the easiest question, Eric, is, hey, if our relationship with you deteriorates, you go out of business, or we feel that your pricing is going to be a problem, who else can we have come in and fully service, add, modify, change this system without anything necessary to their disposal other than a password? Great question, Jim.
Yeah, same here. It's very similar. Like if I needed to fire you and hire somebody else, who could I bring in, that could work on the system? And then I follow up with, what are you not giving me? System, because a lot of times things might get conveniently forgotten about, like when you're being pitched something. So I like to follow up with, what else? What am I not asking? That you would normally hear from other customers, just to try to see if you can tease it out.
Tony, one of the sleazy vendors that I used to deal with way back in the day used to have a saying called truth in its best light, right? So maybe it's like, hey, give me truth in its worst light here. I want to know all the gotchas. What, Tony, you've been around for a long time. I mean, what would you recommend that they make sure they get sort of out of
I think, like Jim said, he's putting himself on the line every time he goes there. Is there somebody else that can work on my system? Really, Distech was founded on that as well. Because our tools are free, our products are open protocol, there's no proprietary. You can have somebody else put in their system and still communicate with our system. We haven't locked it down. So, yeah, we think we're doing a better job than everybody else. We know we are. And so we put ourselves on the line, and our integrators too. And we've been very successful because people see the value that we provide.
Well, something too, Jim, and I got to tell you, you remind me a lot of my integrators that I work with in Atlanta, and those guys, it's like, hey, you know what? Let me get in there. If I can't outserve and outperform somebody else, you should go get somebody else anyway. So they're not trying to lock themselves in, in such a way that the customer can't easily move on if they need to. They're willing to just put their reputation and earn their money every day. So that's sort of fair to how you guys think about it, Jim?
Yes, my background comes from working for companies that was the focus, was to get in and lock the customer down so that you get repeat business. And when we founded JMS almost 15 years ago now, that was our focus, was to do it another way, to base it upon true open solutions, and our reputation will earn us the next day. And I hate to say it, over the years, we've lost a couple customers as a result of that. And it wasn't our fault or just the relationship deteriorated. That's what we do. We give them that option. And I don't like to say that we've lost a couple, but the good thing is I can look back and sleep well at night to know that they were perfectly fine going and find somebody else to service and expand their system. We lived up to what we said we would do.
Yeah. Paul, I'm sure you've had the experience with somebody like Jim who, for whatever reason, they put pressure, you have to let them go, but then you wind up bringing them back because you really realize they have your best interest at heart. And I think at the end of the day, we're all looking for those long-term relationships. I want to shift gears now. I want to get into use the B word.
Okay.
Budget. So we got all these COVID things that are coming out, and I think a lot of our listeners are probably going, UV lights sound great, equipment upgrades sound great, but who's going to pay for this? And, Dustin, I think you got a couple of politicians in your pocket because you've got some solutions. And Distech is, again, I think part of your value add is you guys have sort of researched this. Let's talk about, for our viewers out there who maybe want to make some changes but don't know how they're going to pay for it, what can Dustin and your Uncle Sam do for it?
Yeah, sure. Happy to talk about it here. And I've got my cheat sheet up here. So you got the traditional sources of funding through the state, local referendums, stuff like that. But the current presidential administration has put out a lot of financing and support specifically to schools. We had the CARES Act in March of 2020. That was $30 billion. And then in December, we had the COVID relief package that was $82 billion. Biden has said that, the initial things were down payments for future money for education. We have the American Rescue Plan that just came out here in March of 2021. That's $168 billion. I think that works out to about $2,600 per kid, whereas before it was $1,100 per kid. And most of this money is going to population dense areas, which I think like 70-80% of schools are in population dense or urban areas, right? Where we're going to have a lot of these systems. And interestingly enough, they are even putting education funding and things in other legislation too. There's the new infrastructure plan from Biden, that's $2 trillion. And he's got $100 billion in there to specifically address some of the capital equipment needs. The prior funding that's come out, there's a list of 12 different topics: makeup for lost learning, cleaning strategies, HVAC improvements is one of them. But there's going to be more funding coming out.
Well, Tony, I got to ask you because, that all sounds great, but then I think about dealing with the government and I'm going, oh my gosh, who has time for that? Right, Jim? I mean, you're probably thinking that way too, but Tony, it seems like one of the things you guys have done at Distech is you've really trained your people on being able to help their integrators or K-12 type customers sort of down that road a little bit. Is that a fair statement? And if so, how would they get help from their Distech rep?
Yeah, Eric, we were purchased by Acuity Brands a little over 5 years ago, and they deal with rebates and working through the system and have done a lot of that. And so we've been talking with their employees that deal with that situation and trying to learn how we can bring that value to our SIs as well. So as we're doing a lot of research, Acuity's into lighting. So there's a lot of energy rebates and things associated with that. Then, that equates into circadian rhythms and the healthy building and the things that we're talking about here. So it all wraps around, how do you get that money? Just because Dustin threw those numbers out there doesn't mean it's going to be allocated to the HVAC or the building controls portion of the schools. So we have to, inform Paul and Jim and the people about how they can do that to leverage their position to try to get some of that money.
Well, and I would encourage our audience, don't shy away from it, right? It's there to be used to get the K-12 going again. So you guys agree or disagree? Is it worth spending some time trying to get that money? Paul, how much have you guys gotten for Chicago?
Supposedly, according to the news, we're earmarked with the recent budget for $1.8 billion.
That's just to sign Justin Fields as the Bears quarterback, right?
Well, it goes to a number of different pots. Traditionally, if you look across, K through 12, usually there's a lot of deficits where people have to run lean. So while this money can't go to pay debt or interest payments, there's been a lot of need and a lot of additional spending. So I think there's going to be a lot on the educational side. I mean, obviously a lot on the capital and operations side that need to get funded. So hopefully we get a good amount. It's still being worked out by our C-suite. But I wanted to add that another source of funding that people can look at is talking to their utility companies. So like here in Chicago, both of our utility companies provide incentives for energy savings. So that's another path to revenue that we've seen and we've been utilizing quite a bit by working with them and working with our TCs in order to make sure that we fill out applications. Because literally for us, it's you fill out a form, you have it validated by the utility provider, and then they say, well, it looks like you're going to save X amount of dollars by implementing a modern control schema. We'll cut you a check, and then we get a check when the project's done. So it's a very nice and simple thing to get some free money from the utilities.
Oh, very, very cool. Jim, what are you saying with your clients down there?
Well, I don't know that we've seen anything actually be implemented yet, because I think the Texas legislature still is deciding on how to distribute that fund. But if it's anything like the recent funds that were dispersed for the emergency repairs for the recent blizzard that we had here in Dallas and all the damage that was caused by that, it's going to be a mad scramble for all the people wanting to have their hands in that pie. And I think that's one of the things that we could really use some help on, is making sure that we understand the message to take to the customers and know who the people are within the organizations, because there's so many silos within school districts that all have an interest in wanting to get a piece of that money, and how putting together a strategy to best implement that.
No, it sounds great. Dustin, don't you have a white paper or something on this too about how to go about it? Did I understand that, or did I get that wrong?
I'm sorry, what?
Do you have a sort of a white paper or something that?
So there's like the ASHRAE guidelines for COVID, and we've been working on that. We have a pretty good learning presentation and a white paper that goes with it to help educate schools about the different technologies that can go into your building that we've talked about a little bit today. But yeah, everybody's going to be gunning for this funding. It's largely being distributed by the state. I do want to add that it's not only going to public schools, but also the private schools. I forgot to say that earlier.
Well, and I would think, guys, and you tell me, I mean, if we're going to go and fight for some of this money, I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, it's ventilation, UV lights, right? I mean, we got to kill those little critters. I mean, right? So
you only get a chance once every 30 years to change out your equipment and your systems, and we have a once in a lifetime opportunity to get access to this funding. And it's a lot to go through for the average school district. I'm sure Paul could talk about it. There's 10 different technologies you could put into a building, and what to specify and what's the design is really hard to get through.
Well, a whole host of different system configurations, especially if your buildings are built over many, many generations. So that's the other challenge.
So, guys, I'm thinking, again, I'm hearing all this stuff about fighting for money, but who else kills COVID? I mean, we're the COVID killers, right? We need to get that. We need to get that money. So, Paul, I mean, you're in the trenches here in these conversations, and talk to us. What are the talking points? How do you get the attention so we can get some of that money coming to our industry? And then, Dustin, if you'd follow up with, are there any gotchas, any things we need to make sure get done along the way once we get the money?
Sure. So for us, for how to get the money, it's really to expose what we do. Basically, like the control side of things in my organization is just not a sexy thing. And until senior leadership has some visibility, and that really comes back to being able to expose the air quality, expose the conditions of the systems, and a lot of that comes through dashboarding and being able to centralize your data sets and really sort of show what you're doing and make it meaningful, for the folks that are going to be looking at it. So like our senior leadership people, they're not going to know what an air handler is or what a univent is or any of that kind of stuff. They just want to know, are we heating? Are we cooling? Is the comfort within reason? Are we providing good airflow? And so I think by taking all of the sensors and gadgets and all the devices that we have and bringing it into a sort of a simplistic view for leadership and the public and whoever else needs to have visibility on that, you can build that. you can build an air quality dashboard with a lot of these the systems that are here, especially with the DisTech controls and with all of the products that are within the portfolio. You can build out all of that yourself with these open tool sets. And so then you can take, your airflow stations and then calculate your air changes per hour. You can, take, you do a simplified dashboard of what is the set point for heating and cooling for a space. What is it actually at? It's very simplistic things that people can relate to from, their home HVAC systems, and look at that from a leadership perspective. So.
Yeah, so you got to have some meaningful data, like, we saved this many teachers today, right, from getting COVID, something like that, right? So, but Tony, Jim, and Dustin, I mean, what makes a good dashboard, and what do you look for when you're looking for something to build a dashboard with?
I think there's a lot of different definitions of what a dashboard could be, and to Paul's point, there's the dashboard that you want to show to the executive management. I've seen schools, Eric, that actually put a dashboard in the central lobby, and the different wings of the school, the kids compete against each other on energy savings, and showing how that they're using gray water and how they're turning off lights and the different things that they're doing to get the kids involved and be a part of the system. I think that can be the same with COVID. We could use the data that we have today and start showing people how they're safer and how the environment is clean.
What do you think, Jim?
Yeah, we've seen dashboards used in many ways, and the systems allow us to do that. We've seen dashboards that are utilized to show one school for the public to see the strategies that they put in place and what it's impacted in their carbon footprint and their energy use. We've seen it be used across the whole school district to put schools in competition for awards on a timely basis, whether it be monthly or quarterly, so that they're competing based on square footage. It also helps them identify, based upon that, the schools that have the greatest need because of their mechanical systems are just energy hogs. And then we've seen operational dashboards that we put together for customers that they can look at their systems and real quickly ascertain where their hot spots or cold spots or their energy hogs are, or their problem maintenance areas are. So we have not done anything for COVID yet, but applying it to that would not be difficult at all.
Well, and I'm thinking too, probably more important than ever, the dashboarding, because you can have the building be safe, the K-12 be safe, but if the teachers don't believe it or the parents don't believe it, then, you might have a really safe school, but nobody's coming in. Paul, I see you shaking your head. Yeah. Are you thinking that that's got to be a big part of your strategy to get people to come back?
Oh, definitely. It's reassuring folks that, from a mechanical standpoint, we're providing the required ventilation that's needed in order to properly condition the space. Back when we were in negotiations with our teachers union, there was all this, how do you prove that it's safe and things like that. And, it boils down to the math and the data that comes back from these systems. If you go back to the drawings and blueprints and what your test and balance reports are from that, you can prove your air changes per hour. Show that you have that through whatever type of filtering you're doing, and then whatever auxiliary kill path, whether it's bipolar or UV, that you're implementing as well, or augmenting with, natural ventilation, worst case scenario, a DOAS system, or portable HEPA units in the spaces. So I think it's such a complicated topic to explain to the layperson that you have to approach it step by step, sort of what is ventilation, what comprises it, and then go through how you go and do these calculations and then expand on it, but also be able to take your lumps as well too. So for us, we had to post a air quality dashboard and exposed it to the public, where we inventoried every single every single room within the district, every single room. So 64 million square feet. I think it was something like 54,000 rooms that we inventoried. Do you have supply? Do you have exhaust? Is it a room that's designed for occupancy? Is it, are we putting an air purifier in there? All sorts of different things. It was a massive undertaking, but in the end, we have to show that these are the rooms that are ready. Occupancy. Luckily, we have very few rooms that are not ready, and most of them are like maintenance rooms and boiler rooms and things like that. So
Yeah, it seems like it's more important than ever to have a dashboard or an app. And Tony, I know with you guys have the apps where you guys can even see it on the phone. You can serve it up different ways is what I'm getting at with this.
We can. We've got graphics. We've got apps that, a teacher could be able to control the temperature and the lights in her room from a phone. So it can be touchless, right? So there's lots of opportunity to take advantage of the technology that's out there today.
Now, before we get to our questions, I promised Tony we'd have a little humor in here. So here's my joke. So Dustin, with all the stuff Paul's talking about all the sensor data and how we can show that the spaces are safe, what do you say to the conspiracy theorists who think this is all a plot by Bill Gates and George Soros to get people back to school? What's your take on that?
Gosh, I don't know. I think that, there's a lot of science behind the data. ASHRAE has put out a lot of studies around this to study the impact of the pandemic and the changes that we're making. And I think there'll be future guidance from ASHRAE. I mean, bipolar ionization and UV lighting, they've been around since the 80s. I mean, they're older than I am, right? So this isn't new technology that we're dealing with. It's been out for decades. And the best thing about this technology is it doesn't just make the building safer, it makes the students more productive, which is something that we haven't talked about yet, and something we talk about a lot at Distech. If you ask the average superintendent, hey, do you want to save 10% on energy or raise your test scores 10%? I think they'd say, hey, raise my test scores, right? And that's something I'm really excited about for these changes in school districts.
No, absolutely. And for our listeners out there, go back and listen to episode 2 of DCTV where we talk about circadian rhythms and how incorporating the lights. And Paul, I see you shaking your head. Yes. Yeah. Is that something you guys have done? Have you experimented some of the circadian rhythms at your schools?
We're dipping our toes into it right now. I mean, we've, like a lot of folks, have been doing a lot of LED upgrades throughout, but just more relamping, so taking out the compact fluorescents and putting in the LEDs without a whole lot of thought to circadian rhythm and the effects of it. But I've been focused on that, especially in our spaces where we have more sensitive students and occupants, and trying to make sure that we're being mindful and thinking about what we can do from that perspective. Because, I mean, if you read a lot of the science and the studies that are out there, if you're able to align the lighting systems to the circadian rhythm of the occupants, you do have a better experience in the space. And if we can make it more comfortable for a person to be in the space, whether or not we're conditioning for temperature and heating, cooling, and or light, you're going to have a better time in the space. You're going to learn more. You're going to feel more comfortable, and it's not going to be an inhospitable place to be. So the studies are there. We want to do a couple proof of concepts with a couple systems throughout our district, and then really loop in our health and wellness teams in order to check with the occupants to verify, that this is the path that we want to go down, and then go whole hog into it, because we're only going to get one shot with LED, because it'll be, I'll probably be long retired after, these LED systems burn out and have to be replaced. So why not do it the right way, so that way we can properly condition the space and make it a better system instead of just be blasting light, and as much as possible.
Very, very cool. I like it. Well, listen, we got some questions lined up, but before we get to those, guys, final thoughts, and then we'll roll into questions. And I want to start with one of the key pieces I've gotten out of this is making sure that your systems are future ready, because again, one thing we can count on is technology is going to change, programming is going to change, ASHRAE standards are going to change to update to the time. So making sure your system is future ready. So that's my take. Tony, what would you like to leave the audience with? Final thoughts.
Yeah, same sort of thought, Eric. Just Paul said he has one shot on the LED lights. A BAS system is usually in there for a number of years as well. So, do your homework and make sure you're putting the right system in. Future ready is important. Open is important. All these changes that are happening today, make sure that you've got a system that can accommodate those changes. That can do that for you.
Very cool. Dustin, what about you? What final thoughts?
So implementing this stuff, there is some gotchas. When you're putting new equipment into an old building, you're changing the relationships and the design of that building. So you could change the intended pressure relationships between spaces. So if you have different wings, you could have air corridors, or if you have like a cafeteria next to a kitchen, you could draw smoke from your kitchen into your cafeteria. So it's really important that when implementing these changes, you have a whole team of professionals, whether it's a mechanical contractor, electrical contractor, original architect, and then specifically your controls contractor to make everything seamless and smooth, to integrate all the pieces of equipment together. It's really important that you have a good design team and implementation team.
Well, or you could just hire Jim, right?
Yeah,
Exactly.
Jim's the best in the business.
So, Jim, what about you? Final thoughts on this wonderful K12, Are You Making the Grade episode?
Well, I just say open solutions. Make sure that it's not just a solution that's chosen based on open protocol, but a true open solution. Qualify your systems integrators and select a partner or partners to deliver that for you.
Very well said. And Paul, the final word is for you, my friend. I'm thinking about moving to Chicago just so I can put my kids in your school district.
Well, thank you for that. Yeah, I mean, it's sort of a amalgamation of all of the thoughts. I mean, open protocol, make sure you get what you want, and then specify that in your specifications. You know, whether it be warranty terms, tool set turnover, license turnover, things like that. In design, like Dustin was talking, make sure you're not over designing, or your engineers are not over designing for the space. You know, we find that you'll get some engineering firms who come with these crazy complicated designs for, 100-year-old building, and it's like, yes, you're going to get maybe a couple lead points on that, but you're making it so dramatically difficult to service and work on, where we could be a little less energy efficient, but it'll be much easier for serviceability for the longevity of these things. And to Tony's point, we're investing in these things, like for us, investing in them for a very long time. We want these things. We want our payback 10 or 20 or 30 years, to be functional. You have that mindset that it's for the long haul. So that's it.
Well said, Paul. And I think Bill Gates is calling Tony, trying to get hold of him. But tell Bill he's got to stay on hold here. We got some questions we need to ask. He can wait in the queue like everybody else. So we got a few minutes for questions, guys. Can we take a few? Well, here we go, guys. It's showtime. Bill Gates. Tony, hopefully you told Bill Gates to, hold on to his money. He's going to need to. But, hey, we got some questions teed up. And if you have a question, please just reach out in the chat. We'll try to get to them. Special thanks to the panel with what they've done so far. Our first question comes from Show Me the Money in Minneapolis, Minnesota. He wants to know, or she wants to know, where can I find out more about getting funding in my area? Very interesting. Dustin, I think this is going to be for you, buddy.
Sure, yeah. So a lot of the funding that we talked about earlier on in the webinar is going to be left to be delegated by the states. So in some states, they're well underway to implementing these changes. And in some states, they're still trying to figure it out. So you can check with your local state legislature, and then also with your Builders Exchange or Distech RSM.
Well, very cool. And I can't, emphasize enough, and Tony, if you want to hop in on this too, you can. Your Distech RSM is more than just a controls guy. I mean, I know from our personal experience, you guys have really helped us grow our business. And fair statement, Tony, that if they can reach out their RSM and they'll be glad to help.
No, absolutely. Really, we want to be a business coach, a business advisor. We want to be a part of your business. We want to help you. So anything you're looking for, we try to be an extension of your system integrator, of your business, to be there for you.
Very, very cool. Well, Tony, while I got you, Bill, I think it's Bill Gates again, is saying he needs to supplement his income. I was wondering if you guys are still hiring.
We're always hiring. We actually, during COVID, we've actually expanded a lot. I think we grew about 50 people over the last year. So always interested in good qualified people. So be sure to look at our career listing and apply.
There you go. So Bill Gates might wind up at Distech before it's all said and done. Second question, and Paul, you can probably chime in on this as well as Jim and Tony. This particular question goes for older buildings, and I'm assuming they're talking about retrofit. Do all these principles apply to older buildings? And guys, I'll add my spin on this, which is, how does that differentiate when you're going with an older building versus new construction from your experiences? Why don't we start with you, Paul?
Well, in my experience, it's like I mentioned, our average age is a little over 80 years old, our buildings. I love doing projects in the older buildings over any of the newer ones because it's a lot simpler. The simpler design, if you have like a tunnel system with mixing boxes and things like that, you can do all the work down in the mechanical spaces. Makes it a lot easier. You're not going to be as efficient as you would with like the fan power box system or something more complicated. It just makes the project go a little bit quicker. So sort of my take on it. I mean, there are some advantages with the newer buildings. Obviously, you're going to be able to be much more energy efficient. You're going to have much cooler stuff. So like really big built up air handlers in some cases with heat recovery wheels and various other things like that. And that's really neat until it goes wrong and stuff breaks. So then it becomes this, if you don't have a team that understands how the mechanical system works in those buildings to be able to go and fix it, then you're going to spend a tremendous amount of time trying to figure out what actually went wrong. Whereas it's much simpler in the older buildings.
That makes a lot of sense. And from a facilities manager standpoint, some of our listeners out there might be facility managers. Are there a couple of questions that you make sure to ask your integrator that sort of helps you sort of really know whether they know what they're doing or not? And if so, what would those questions be?
Oh, geez. Well, I usually ask when we're bringing on vendors for sort of a history of some of the work that they've done in sort of in our space, in our area. So, usually it's an examination of some of the past projects that they've done, sequences they've implemented, for those particular spaces. So, I mean, you can go all sorts of different ways into really technical or into more of like an operational standpoint. I ask, for like weird questions about actuator installations and things like that of, how would you go about approaching this particular scenario? And normally you find in the scenarios that I throw out, you can just quickly bolt an actuator up onto a hot deck, cold deck using the stock mount. But most people will realize from past experience in this particular scenario that I would be referencing that you need to have some additional bracing. So it's additional unistrut with, and build it up so that way you don't have any of the flex that takes away from the stroke of the actuator. So, I mean, you want to think about your environment that you're bringing the people into and the unique challenges that you've had to deal with over time, and then apply, create questions based on that.
Oh, very, 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 very good advice there. Jim, I'm gonna come right back to you. Sort of the same question. What sort of differences do you see between new construction and retrofit? And then also, what are questions that people ask you, facility managers or project managers, to let you know that they're really on the ball?
So probably the biggest differentiation between a new project and existing is the opportunity to collaborate on an existing building and come up with the best solution for the customer. And maybe it's not a total replacement of systems. It is making use of the HVAC equipment as well as the controls equipment that's in place. We can take the tools that we have and integrate what is worth reusing and take advantage of the new technologies, the new sequences of operations, new strategies to provide a safe, clean, comfortable environment for the kids. As far as for the customers asking us questions, along those lines, probably some references of some integration of where we've integrated to various systems, because as we've said, most of our customers are dealing a lot of times with multiple systems, and they're looking for a good solution to cost effectively take advantage of that investment that they have. Make sure that they ask us about open, what we really mean by open. And a little bit like what Paul said, is they'll ask some technical questions to find out our expertise and ask for some references as well.
Makes a lot of sense. And Tony, I want to hop over to you for a minute, because I want to ask you if this is a fair statement. I know we're a distributor in Georgia and Florida, and as a distributor, we, like the manufacturer, have a vested interest in making sure that that the product and our product gets installed properly and our reputation is intact. So I think where you got vendors like Distech, and there are others that have a distribution network. Fair statement, guys. You call your local distributor too, because he's going to know the pros and cons of each of his individual integrators that are working with that product. Would you agree with that, Tony?
Absolutely. I mean, we train both our system integrators and our distributors who train their customers, and they're all qualified to put a Distech system in and do a great job with it.
Yeah, and I think, again, that gets back to what we sort of talked about in open. I encourage you, if you haven't seen, episode 1 of DCTV, we talked about what does open really mean. Jim alluded to it, but, one of the things about open is you have multiple people that can work on your system, including yourself, if you want to do that. So good question there. We got another one, and it's sort of related, guys. This is kind of a fascinating question. And the gist of this question, if I'm understanding it correctly, is would you recommend, and I guess this applies to both new construction or retrofit, trying to get a vendor that can do as much of the project as possible? I think this is probably coming from the fact that with Distech, you guys do controls, but you also do lighting and stuff like that, as opposed to, sort of breaking it out and having different silos. So somebody come in and do the lighting, somebody come in and do the controls. And Paul, you probably had a lot of experience with this. I'll throw that question to you first. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely is advantageous to try to have one vendor do as much of the work as possible. We frequently see where we have a project right now where there's a vendor who's doing the lighting, another vendor doing the controls, and in the scope for the vendor that's doing the lighting, it says to integrate with PAS, but then on the control side, the scope doesn't, scoping documents and drawings don't have that language there. So it gets kind of complicated and muddled, and then it becomes a finger pointing game. I mean, it's far easier when you can have, the single vendor do it. I mean, at the end of the day, your scope and your drawings and your contract package need to be pretty clear too, so that way it's not ambiguous. So, but yeah, both in new and in retrofit, it is very helpful to have a single vendor.
Well, and if you want to know a definition of ambiguous, look in the dictionary under multiple vendors doing a project and who's responsible for what, right? I mean, a lot of finger pointing that goes on there. Now, I would caution, and Jim, I hope you'll hop in on this too. I mean, I think it's great to have a single vendor do as much of it as possible, but agree or disagree, you want to make sure that system is open and the definition is open. We've talked about multiple people can work on. Fair statement, guys?
Very much so.
Oh yes, definitely. Yeah, if you're working towards an open solution, that's the beauty of it, is you have the ability to choose whether you want to create a relationship with one vendor or multiple vendors, or I would at least encourage that the integration be under one vendor, that they are responsible for all the integration, so that you can eliminate that ambiguity that is often there by saying integrate two systems, and in the electrical lighting spec it may say provide a backnet integration, and in the building automation spec it'll say integrate the lighting, and there it is just wide open. So really need to have somebody responsible for defining that and delivering that.
No, exactly. And Tony and Dustin, I mean, your reps are really good at sort of being involved in that process.
I mean, there's so much you can do with these integrated systems. We talk about the Internet of Things, right? That's smart devices being put on a network. So if we have intelligent lighting, intelligent controls, intelligent cameras, and card access and fire systems, right? All these systems can go on a network now. And do we need to install separate networks? Is there any ability to break down the silos between these different systems so that we can get additional benefits and value, whether that's saving energy, enhanced operations, or added features and benefits, right? I think there's one study by Harvard that said that just eliminating silos between building systems could reduce energy spend by 40%. So there's a lot of really good use cases in specific scenarios where you can get additional value by combining these systems. And that's what's great about working with a Distech integrator, is they understand all these different systems and they can act as a consultant to you to pick the best solution to your building, whatever that may be.
Yeah, Eric, just to take that one step further, we used to be temperature controls people, and now we're system integrators and solution integrators, right? We touch all of these systems out there. So these guys that used to be the temperature controls guys are now your solution guys. So they have the expertise to talk to these multiple systems.
Well, and Paul, I want you to hop in on this because, I would encourage our integration. They're like I said, they're temperature controls people that can put a system in. They're people that can wire a network together, but then they're master systems integrators. And I think one of the things, if you're a master systems integrator, you're probably already doing this, but Paul, I think it would be fair to say too, don't be afraid to go out and just because there's some specifications that have been written, I mean, people can come and try to meet the specifications, or they can sit down with somebody, Paul, and say, yeah, you can do it this way if you want to, but what we have found is if you do it this way, you're going to get these other. So is that something you sort of look for your master systems integrators?
Very much so. I always try to push my vendors to go think outside the box where, our specifications might be limited. What can we do better? How can we be better, more efficient, and improve on process and integrations and, think outside the box. I mean, with lighting, it's something that we're looking at right now beyond our standard spec for lighting, which is just LED of a certain color temperature. What can we do for color balancing, and blue light balancing and then natural light harvesting and all that kind of stuff. And so it's really working with the different vendors in order to figure out where you can go above and beyond. And then you can take those ideas and pitch it to leadership. Is this something that they find interesting, or are there other stakeholders within the organization that are going like this integration of this whatever, this Internet of Things thing that you're going to be bringing? So, yeah, it's definitely something I look for with my vendors, and I'm always there to listen and hear about new products and new ways of doing things.
No, it's great. And Jim, I know you being a Distech partner. Do this, and I'd like for you to speak a little bit more too as a master. Maybe for some of our listeners out there, maybe haven't quite got to the level that you have in terms of master systems integration, and are looking for a way to differentiate. I know part of being with the Distech family is, they're training you guys on how to be more than just an installer or a programmer, right? So, what are some things that you would recommend to some of our integrators that are listening out there where they could up their game?
Well, I think the first place to start is take advantage of what Distech has to offer in the unified solution. The easiest way is to take the Eclipse product line along with the Enlight system and work with a school to look at applying that as you being the master systems integrator and integrating those two systems and showing the advantages of sharing the backbone, the communication backbone, as well as the information across those into one unified user experience and graphics package. I think that's a great place to start. And from there, you can start understanding how the systems are put together, the communication needs, the coordination that's required, and then expand from there to start looking at additional systems outside of the Distech product line.
Very good. Tony, Dustin, any final thoughts before we hop off here?
I'd like to thank Jim and Paul for joining us today. I think they've given a great insight into the school market and their experience there. So I really appreciate those guys joining us.
Yeah, really do, guys. And listen, just so you know, Laura Jane just sent me something over the line, and the PTA Association of America is reaching out. I want to give you guys all an honorary Purple Heart because the moms and dads of America need their kids back in school. They need their lives back. And I think if you listen to this, you've got some great ideas on how to get the K-12 making the grades so we can get our kids back to school. So thanks very much, guys. Really appreciate you. And to our listeners out there, thank you so much for tuning in. We'll be back soon with another edition of DCTV. Take care, guys.
Thanks.
Some people arrive at work on a Monday feeling the morning blues. Personally, I don't mind. For the past 2 weeks, I've been working with the best assistant ever. It's a little chilly this morning, and wearing a winter coat at my desk is not my style. Not to worry, I have the luxury of an assistant who can control the thermostat for me. No need to move from my chair. Efficiency at its finest. Of course, it's always when you need your caffeine boost that the coffee machine decides to stop working. At least I don't need to chase down someone to fix it. Workplace reports the incident for me.